Story 1. Am I the a-hole for telling my husband I told you so and laughing at me when we got the paternity test results? 27 Fahrenheits. Have been married to my husband to 1.8 millions for 2 years and gave birth to our daughter 5 weeks ago. I'll try to keep this short, so I don't waste your time with any irrelevant details. What happened was that our daughter came out with blonde hair and pale blue eyes, while my husband and I have brown hair and brown eyes. My husband freaked out at this and refused to listen to my explanation that sometimes babies are born with lighter hair and eyes that get darker over time. He demanded a paternity test and threatened to divorce me if I didn't comply, so I did. After my daughter and I got home from the hospital, my husband went to stay at his parents' house for the first 3 weeks to get some space from me, while I recovered, and he told them what was happening. My mill called and informed me that if the paternity test revealed that the child wasn't his, she would do anything within her power to make sure that I was taken to the cleaners during the divorce. I had my sister to lean on and help me take care of the baby during this. We got the results back yesterday, and my husband came home to view them with me. I was on the couch in the living room, so he sat next to me, and we started to read the results. They showed that he was the father, and my husband had this shocked, kind of mortified look on his face with his eyes wide as he stared at it. I couldn't help but say, "I told you so," and started laughing at the way he looked. My husband snapped out of his shock and got mad at me for laughing at him. We argued for a bit, which was mainly him yelling at me, before my sister came downstairs and my husband shut up. After that, my husband went back to his parents' house to clear his head, and 2-3 hours later, my mill called to scold me about laughing in my husband's face, because apparently it was kicking him while he was down. She's also left a couple nasty texts essentially saying the same thing this morning. I don't think I'm but I'd like outsider perspective on this. Story. Aita for telling my husband if he fights for custody of his kids, I will divorce him. I 27 Fahrenheits am vehemently child-free. I am sterilized and have no intention of having or caring for any child. I married my husband, 33 millions, last year and did not know he had any children until 5 days ago. I travel for work for myself, and have amazing pay for very few active working hours. I am a honeymoon planner, owning my own business. We have a joint account for bills and our own separate accounts for savings and fun money. My husband sat me down 5 days ago and told me he hadn't been completely honest with me, and revealed he has 2 children, 10 millions and 7 Fahrenheits. He pays regular child support. However, it dips into his fun money and he wants to be able to have fun like I am. So he said he would fight for 50-50 its custody. I was furious he had lied to me and was even more angry when he told me he wanted 50-50 its. He works 16-hour shifts as a nurse, and that would mean I would have to take care of the children when I'm not working or are working from home. I told him if he fights for custody, I will leave him. We have a prenup, so a divorce will be rather simple. I get 100% of my business, all of my savings and fun money, and the house, as I inherited it from my grandmother. He called me an asshole and told me I should step up so that he can have more money in his savings and for fun. And because the kids won't be much hassle due to their ages. So Aita for telling him I will divorce him if he goes through with filing for custody. Edit update. Thank you all so much for helping me with this situation. I knew his lies were enough of a reason to divorce and I'm proud to announce, soon-to-be ex. I just didn't know if divorcing him with kids in the mix would make me an asshole, especially because he works so much. He has since vacated my house. I have spoken to my lawyer and am filing for an annulment. I can, because he married me in an act of fraud. The AM protects me as it was a fraudulent marriage. Thank you all once again. Story 3. Aita for breaking my deathbed promise to my wife to take care of her Down syndrome daughter. 55 millions. Just lost my wife, 56 Fahrenheits, to cancer. My late wife's entire life was about her 30-year-old daughter, who suffers from Down syndrome and has never and will never have the ability to live independently. Nor will she ever have the ability to ever exercise any real amount of emotional impulse control. And before you all start in on the evil stepdad who doesn't care to understand line of thinking, I want to add that I have been in her life since she was 5, and spent years fearing the day where she was physically developed to the point where punches, scratches, and throwing things were a real threat. Once that happened, all of my wife's friends stopped visiting our house. One of them even said that her uncle deals with vicious dogs for a living and she feels safer around his workplace than at our house. I many times have ended up needing to go to the doctors for the crime of sitting in the same room as my stepdaughter and having her attempt to pound my head in, throw a heavy object at me, or trying to choke me after I had fallen asleep. My late wife was the only one who could reliably calm her down. When we started using caregivers for my stepdaughter after my wife was diagnosed, They would be asking me whether I could enlighten them on a better way to explain things to my stepdaughter when she was going ballistic. When even they, who were used to explaining things to people who just didn't get things, were still struggling and asking for insight. When my late wife was diagnosed, the first word out of her mouth was my stepdaughter's name. She cried every day for what was to become of her. In her desperation, she tried to press the doctor for chemotherapy when it no longer made sense, turned to alternative medicine despite it making her feel worse, saying she would have stopped all treatment if she was only leaving behind a employable, functioning 30-year-old. On her deathbed, she made me promise to not let her fall into the hands of a state care facility. I promised her because I didn't have the heart not to. But now, after my grief fog has cleared 2 months later, my stepdaughter remains the same. She doesn't understand her mom is dead, only that she's gone, and is angry at me for it, saying she'll be good, so bring her back. Caregivers are expensive. I don't make much. I didn't resent any medical expenses when it was my wife, but I admit that I resent my stepdaughter. My own grown kids won't visit with her around. If I hadn't made the deathbed promise, the decision would have been easy. And finally, I made the decision that I needed to put her in a state-run facility, as even with my wife leaving me everything, I couldn't afford anything better. Now family are calling me the evil stepdad and a mother's worst nightmare. Aita story. Aita for showing up to my boyfriend's house to a family dinner in lingerie. My boyfriend, 35, and I, 29, have been dating for 6 months. On Friday night, we made plans to have a night in I was going to go over. We planned on making dinner together, watch movies, and I was to spend the night. On Thursday, I had some holiday shopping to do. While shopping after work and saw some cute lingerie, I thought I'd surprise my boyfriend with it on Friday night, so I bought it. Friday after work, I took a shower, did my hair, makeup, and got dressed. It's pretty cold where we live, so I put on some knee-high boots, the lingerie, and a knee-length coat only LOL, and headed to my boyfriend's apartment. He gave me a key recently, so I used it to get in since he knew I was coming over and had plans together. To my surprise, when I got there, he was not alone. His mom was in from out of state. This was my first time meeting her. My boyfriend and his mom kept telling me to take off my jacket, but I couldn't because all I was wearing was lingerie. After I couldn't say no any longer. The only thing I could come up with was asking my boyfriend if he could give me my sweats I keep at his apartment because I was so cold. When we got into his room, he asked me why I was being so weird about my jacket and why I wouldn't take it off. When I told him, he busted out laughing. I did as well, to be fair. He told me he was sorry about his mom, but she came in out of state on a surprise visit. After recovering from the laughter, my boyfriend, well being a guy, said, "Can I at least see it before you change?" I let him because that was the whole point. He walked over to kiss me. While he was kissing me, his mom opened the door and lost it. She started calling me a whore and screaming about me fucking her son in her face. My boyfriend was angry and started yelling at her as well about her being unfair and not knocking on the door before opening it. Needless to say, meeting her went terribly. My boyfriend kicked his mom out, and I feel so bad about the whole thing. So Aita. The only reason I sort of feel like the asshole is because of the issue and rift between my BF and his mom now. I don't really know what else I personally could have done differently. Story 5. Aita for sacrificing my daughter's college fund because her sister just gave birth to her 4th child. My 48 Fahrenheits. Older daughter, day 4 Fahrenheits, gave birth to her 4th child 6 months ago. She used to work as a dishwasher, but due to health issues stemming from her 2nd child, chronic back pain, and then her 3rd child, after effects of broken tailbone and more chronic pain that made standing and moving around hard, she can no longer work. She tried her best, getting an office temp job, but after about a week, the woman supervising her said this isn't working out. She was a very uptight woman who claims just because always took her 3 days max to train everybody else to the data entry work that she can't just be a good person and accommodate slower learners. That woman likely caused her to get a bad reputation at the temp agency, and she didn't get hired elsewhere. My daughter's boyfriend, 48 millions, works at Walmart. He had much more hours when she was pregnant, but since then his hours have ebbed and flowed. He said he will take a day in the future to look for jobs, but it's the holidays and he's busy with family. I feel a lot of empathy for my daughter and her boyfriend and wish I could help them out more, but I myself am a single mom working for a nursing home where I struggle to get full-time hours, and my ex ran up a lot of debt in both our names and is now living in another country. My younger daughter, 17 Fahrenheits, has a college fund. The amount in it would be enough to pay a large amount of a 2-year community college tuition, given the scholarships grants she would likely get. She's applied to 4-year universities with the understanding that she'd be taking out loans and working, so she's deciding between 4 years and community college. The other shoe dropped after my older daughter's landlord found out that they were having her boyfriend's brother and girlfriend living in their one bedroom in exchange for them helping with the rent, and they got evicted. My daughter agrees it was wrong to lie to the landlord, and both parents are depressed because her boyfriend got a job offer one state away and they would have to move from their support network. They came to me asking for help so they could have more time to find financial stability here. I was torn, but seeing my grandkids, I knew my duty was to care for the most vulnerable in the family. So I will be making calls to liquidate my daughter's college fund, saying yes to understanding the penalties, and told my daughter this. She got very cold and said, "You always brag about having a good memory. I hope you remember this moment then." She has not spoken to me since. Spent Thanksgiving inquiring with family friends to see if hospitals are keen to hire college students for kitchen or reception or anything. Made some cryptic posts about how she hopes she'll be grateful one day that she won't have the privilege of studying anything outside of something technical, because she needs something where she'll always be able to find a job in. Aita. Story. Aita, for telling my mom that I'm disgusted and ashamed of my sister. This started when my sister cheated on her now ex-him. After he broke up with her, she stole his dog and took the dog back to our place. She said she was going to put the dog down as revenge. I called her ex when she and mom were out of the house, told him to come over to pick up his dog and opened the door for him. When she found out what I did, she yelled at me in front of our mom, who didn't try to stop her. She said I shouldn't have sided with someone else against her because she has family, at which point I snapped. I told her, "You stole his pet and were planning to euthanize him. You crazy bitch. I don't care that we share DNA. You are a vile, disgusting person, and I'm ashamed of being related to you." Our mom quickly said there was no call for that language, so I told her I meant every word I said. She looked really hurt. I don't feel bad for snapping at my sister, but should I have tried to hide my contempt for my mom to avoid hurting my mom's feelings? Update. I just talked to my dad and stepmom. They said that I can move in with them. I'm packing my bags right now. Story 7. Aita for not giving up my airline seat to a pregnant woman. I was flying by myself on a 5+ hour flight to visit family over the holidays. I specifically booked and paid extra for an aisle seat in the second to last row because I have medical issues that sometimes require quick access to the bathroom. Right before boarding, a woman asked me to give up my seat so she could sit closer to the bathroom. She was pregnant but did not seem distressed. While I felt for her situation, as someone with a medical condition, I did not feel it was fair to demand I move from the seat I planned for and paid for, especially since she apparently had not booked an aisle seat herself in advance. The flight attendants refused to help mediate when she insisted I should have to move. There were also no other aisle or close seats available on the full flight that I or flight crew could facilitate swapping. I tried to recommend she speak to her doctor about needing accommodation if sitting far from the bathroom is not medically advisable for her situation during future flights. Still, my family says I should have inconvenienced myself and given up my seat. I disagree, though. I think she and the flight crew were unfairly targeting me instead of handling it through proper channels. Aita. Story 8. I will be divorcing my wife, at 31, because she feels it's dangerous for me to be around our child, -2 months. My wife always complains about how clumsy I am. I do drop things by accident when my hand hits it unknowingly, and so I do agree with her. But it's not that bad that I'm knocking over things every day. I really just laughed this off before when my wife brought it up, but during the pregnancy she often started to say how she won't let me hold the child because of how clumsy I am. Again, I laughed it off at times, and sometimes when I did take it seriously, I told her there's a difference between knocking over the TV remote and dropping a kid from your arms. Still, I did not think ABT it as much. But then my child was born and I was shocked at how reluctant she was to even let me hold the baby in the hospital. I suddenly saw her panicking when I was even around the baby. It caused a lot of fights, and they've continued till now. It's been a couple of months and I have not been able to hold my baby more than thrice, including once when I held her at the hospital. She now sleeps in the other bedroom with the baby and doesn't even let me hold my own daughter even if I am sitting on the bed, where there wouldn't even be a remote chance of her ever getting hurt even if I dropped her. She almost never leaves our daughter alone with me. I suggested I'd use a child carrier to take her on walks, but she refuses that too, oftentimes suggesting that I'd tip over and fall face first. I think she is overreacting, and I have also suggested going to therapy together, but all she said about the suggestion is talking won't fix your body. She keeps telling me that I'll be the reason that our child would die if I ever held her, and as a father I should realize how dangerous it is and comply with her. All this has really affected me, and I've become a lot more self-conscious. Every time I mess up doing something, she tells me that it's proof that what she's saying is right. I'm a calm person and a pacifist at most times. Even during our fights I've tried to reason with her, find a middle ground, but I've realized that there isn't any. I love my wife and my child more than myself, but I cannot continue this considering how I can't even hold my own child, play with her, take her on walks, etc. Day before yesterday's night. After a fight, I snuck into her bedroom after my wife was asleep. I went to my daughter. I didn't hold her. I just held her hand and looked at her. I was emotional, and I did whisper a few things to her, not that she could hear or understand because she was fast asleep. But this woke my wife up, who was right beside her. She screamed at first and then told me to leave the room immediately. I told her that I was not going to hold her and that I was just there to see her and hold her hand. But she didn't believe me and accused me of being ignorant and selfish. I did lose my temper too, and I offloaded these entire 2 months of frustration onto her. I feel terrible about how I acted that night, and I'm staying at a hotel as she told me to leave the next morning. I wasn't in a mood to argue either, so I quietly left. I cannot seem to get over any of what has happened, and even though it hurts so much, I think I am going to part ways. End.